And good morning, everybody. My name is Nicholas Whitaker. I am the Media Outreach Manager on the News Lab at Google. You can find out more about our team and about the work that we do at g.co/newslab. We have a really great lineup of guests today for yet another one of our SPJ International conversations. I've got Ella here with us, joining us again. I think this is the third time that we've done one of these.
Yeah.
I think we have a couple more lined up as well. We'll get into what this particular session is going to be about in a minute, but I just wanted to highlight on our website, g.co/newslab, that we have a continuing list of new lessons, including 9 new lessons that we just released around verification, which is really useful for journalists, both international and otherwise. You can also check out more about our team, tips and tricks and other information on our Twitter account, twitter.com/Google News Lab. We also have our YouTube page where you may have found this particular video at youtube.com/newslab@Google. You'll find a lot of other resources there, including FAQ videos, other Hangout sessions similar to this, and our office hours, which we do on a regular basis on a variety of different topics and tools. I would also encourage you to check out our Google Plus page, where you can find not only the Q&A app link for this particular session, but all of the previous sessions that we've done as well. And just a quick mention for the Q&A app: if you are interested in adding your voice into this conversation, you can click on the little, if you're on YouTube, join the conversation link in the bottom left-hand corner of the video. That'll drop you into the Q&A app. You can also just leave your questions within the comment section on our Google Plus page. Those will show up here in the presentation, and then we'll add your questions into the mix. Ella, I think that's off to you now.
Perfect. Thank you, Nick, and thank you all for joining us today. The International Community for the Society of Professional Journalists. We're so excited to continue our series of conversations in collaboration with Google News Labs. And today I'm very excited to have with us the founder and CEO of Pressimus, Sam Razi. So Sam is a technologist and also the founder of Iran News Now. He became one of the early pioneers of live blogging as an effective medium for journalism through his coverage of the unrest following the 2009 Iran election. His company operates as a social live publishing platform, and that enhances the way the content is created, interacted upon, and distributed by media organizations, journalists, and storytellers. Joining him today is the managing editor of The Interpreter, James Miller. James has extensively covered Russia and Syria, and he is the contributor at the Daily Beast, Foreign Policy, and Reuters. The work he has on The Interpreter uses the platform Pressimus. But before we get right into it, I like to briefly mention the community to those that may not be familiar with it, and this may be their first time. The SPJ International Community is comprised of amazing journalists in the United States that are reporting on international matters and also have a passion for following global news and trends. We've created a unique experience for our community where they provide questions and topics they would like covered by our speakers, and that's how we're going to start our conversation. And like Nick mentioned, we encourage you guys that are tuned in live, if a question pops up, be engaged. Write the question down in the Q&A section, and we'll do our best to weave it into the conversation. So thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, Elle, and thank you, Nick. We're really excited to be talking to SPJ and to Google News Lab. We've got a really interesting story for you, and it really leads into where we think a lot of kind of the tools and mechanisms and processes for journalism are headed, given the current state of affairs with respect to technology. Everybody having a cell phone that is basically a supercomputer from 10 years ago in their pocket, 24/7 connectivity. I mean, we're all now quite familiar with the fact that, and it wasn't the case a few years ago, but with the fact that most breaking events and stories are initially broken by people that are on the scene, whether they film it or take a picture of it and post it up on Twitter or Facebook or YouTube or another social platform. So that obviously impacts journalists and reporters and how they sort of do what they do, and obviously the journalistic practice is impacted And James is going to have a lot to say about that, and myself. I can sort of rewind back to 2009, okay?
Sure. I think it's super important that I first wanted to start because the community, I know they've had the opportunity to see a brief clip from you.
Sure.
And, you know, I think it's important that they understand the process of how Pressimus came to be. And,
absolutely.
And one thing that's really, like, I kind of noticed was your background's not in journalism. You come from a technology background.
Yes.
And I think that gives you the essence and the foundational knowledge you needed to create the platform.
Indeed. Yeah. So that's actually a very good point. So you know, I've about 20 years of experience in infrastructure. You know, working at telcos and universities. I kind of came at this from a side angle and had to, you know, I am not a full-time journalist, although obviously I'm very familiar with and have done a fair bit of reporting and journalism over the last few years as a result of what happened. So definitely, that's a very good point. So this was.
Can you talk about that moment in 2009?
Yeah, absolutely. So
I think that's really the beginnings of where Pressimus was really the foundation was started.
Yeah,
right?
it's where it was pretty much the idea for it was born. I was in Los Angeles when the story about Ahmadinejad, the president of Iran in 2005 when he was elected, got reelected or reselected in 2009. And what ended up happening was, by some circumstance, I mean, I was a little bit curious as to how, in a very short period of time, the election results were announced. You know, so from when the polls opened up to when the results were announced, it was a very short period of time. It was about 3 hours. So I ended up going online and just sort of looking around because I didn't see anything on the news or sort of the television, you know, mainstream news outlets talking about what was going on in Iran. They sort of announced it and they moved on. So I went online to see if I could find some more information, and I went onto Twitter and started putting out some feelers and just asking if anybody had any information. And what ended up happening was I got sort of bombarded with information coming straight from Iran. People on the ground who were basically capturing the protests, capturing the unrest and sort of the reaction from the government, and placing you know, videos and images online. And nobody was really sort of reporting on this in any sort of organized fashion. So I found myself in a situation where I had the means to sort of, you know, collate and capture what was going on and add a layer of sort of interpretation on it, add context to it. And I started sort of live tweeting and live blogging over the course of several months. The protests actually went on for a period of 6 months, from, I mean, extensively, and it went on even more after that. But from June through December of 2009, it was quite extensive. And so in that process, and given the urgency of the situation, we didn't have the luxury to spend a whole bunch of time really, you know, confirming things to the nth degree. We had to, when I say we, it was myself and a handful of people that I connected with on Twitter, including James Miller, who's on this talk with us. We had to figure out how we can confirm these things and add a layer of sort of authenticity and sort of objectivity to what was going on, while, you know, lives were, you know, being, you know, at risk. And you know, that's kind of a tough situation to be in. So we had some liberties, sort of not having come from a journalistic background, to say, hey, look at this, and we can't confirm this right now. Okay, and we'll come back to this and add a layer of confirmation later. And we'll talk a little bit about these processes shortly here, but very good point that that's sort of the origin of Pressimus. At the time, I was working at the University of British Columbia in the IT department, but, you know, in 2011, I decided to leave because, you know, what we had basically done is effectively come up with a new sort of medium for reporting on breaking events, you know, on anywhere in the world, using a number of sources, including social media, but not limited to social media. And I wanted to take that and the ability to have one person or a small team of people, which is what we were, report at a speed and a level that a lot of people really kind of appreciated and really kind of I think changed how things are reported on even now. So that's where Pressimus came from. Pressimus means be the press, or we are the press in Latin. And it's about that. We want to give people tools that they can use that otherwise wouldn't be available to them to be able to report and tell stories quickly.
Sure. I'd like to hand it over to James because
absolutely.
James, also you don't come from a traditional journalistic background. So can you talk to us about your transition, and also how did your worlds collide when
That's right. So I did not know Sam in 2009, but I heard this NPR radio program. I was actually teaching, and I heard this NPR story about the upcoming elections in Iran, and I got really interested in it. And one of the reasons why I got interested in it is because they interviewed members of a website called Tehran Bureau. And Tehran Bureau was a very humble little blog that was based in Framingham, Massachusetts, just a couple of towns over from where I was teaching, run by expatriates, and in sort of an attempt to break down this complicated Iranian politics to an American audience. And, so I get really interested in this story, the fact that the majority of Iranians were born, for the first time ever, the majority that was voting was born after the 1980s. So all of the geopolitical stuff that framed, what we know about Iran-American relations, most voters are younger than all that. So not the Iran Revolution in 1979, not the Iran-Iraq War. That was all before they were born. So I was really fascinated by this, and I was more fascinated to turn on CNN the day after the election and see live video feed of like 1 million people in the streets of Tehran, because the election, I think, Sam thinks, was rigged. And but what happened next is the rabbit hole that I tumbled down, and I still tumble to this day, because Iran had brought in the big media to sort of showcase this election, and then they kicked the media out when the protests started, and that's where people like Sam and a lot of other people I'll get to started picking up the ball. And early in the morning, maybe on a couple of days after the election, that website Tehran Bureau suggested that if you had a Twitter account, you could change your location from the United States or wherever you were living to Tehran, and then you could hop on Twitter and share information that was coming from Iran. And the idea was to amplify the voices of the Iranians who were sharing information, and also to sort of bury the original poster's identity a little bit. I did this right away. But what's interesting is that about 3 hours later, Wired magazine syndicated this article. So millions of Americans had done it by the end of the day. And so I get involved in this. I don't know a lot about Iran. I knew some about Iran. I'll get into my background in a little bit. But here I am live reporting about what's going on in Iran. And I should say I was not important in this process. Sam actually was very important in this process. And that's what was fascinating was, Huffington Post was running a live blog, and the New York Times were running a live blog, and those live blogs were really great. And those live blogs were quoting Iran News Now and a guy by the name of Josh Sharyar, and they were legends. They were doing this incredible reporting that major news agencies were relying on. I thought Sam was an entire news agency. But he's just one guy, and but at the same time, my background is actually anthropology. So in anthropology, we study a lot of sort of the ethics and sort of methods, scientific methods of determining information. So I was also appalled that a guy who had never been to Iran, didn't know much about Iran, was, me, is now doing this, spreading this information. So I began to really seek to professionalize my own behavior, and really get into verification and analysis of this material that was out there. And sort of fast forward a year, and and sort of Sam and Josh and I are three of the main people doing this work. There were others. There were definitely others. But and then we started to. I was working for EA Worldview. Well, working is a misnomer. I was writing for free for this small academic blog out of the UK. And we began to write about another protest movement that was inspired by Iran, Egypt. And and that was in the fall of 2010. By January 2010, our little blog went from a few hundred or a few thousand readers to millions. And that is where the rubber really hit the road, as far as now we were applying those same journalistic techniques that we had sort of developed to a large extent during the Iran crisis. Now we were applying that to Libya and Egypt and Syria. And I really got involved in Syria in particular. And then I was hired to, in 2013, I was hired to write about Russia. And lo and behold, Russia invades Ukraine, and now we're using Pressimus, and we're using those same techniques to describe yet another conflict, yet another a crisis in a different country under different circumstances. But these all, the same methodologies or similar methodologies applied to all of them.
Indeed.
Awesome. I love it. So I'm going to transition into our first question from the community. I'm going to direct it to Sam, and then James, if you feel you want to add to it, feel free. So our first question: live blogging can be a valuable source if done right. For many veteran journalists like myself, like the person asking the question, this can be a daunting task. So as experts and individuals that have experience in live blogging, what are some tips you would both give to those that are not well versed in the technique, and what metrics do you use to measure success?
Certainly, that's an excellent question. So when I started doing this at the time, I didn't even know that what I was doing had a name, that it was called live blogging, and but that's exactly sort of what it is, like blogging being short for weblogging or web journaling. So what got me into it and sort of enabled the success in that is really just the urgency of the situation that I was covering. So I think key to all of this is having as a journalist a real deep interest in what it is that you're reporting upon, right? Because you're going to have to, in order to live report on something where you have multiple incoming sources of information, your attention is going to be spreading to a number of things all simultaneously. And what really you're trying to do is tap into that flow and see if you notice patterns. When we first started doing this, initially, it was the first time that a major international story broke on sort of social media. So there were not a lot of people trying to muddy those waters. It was just genuine people posting stuff. There were misinformation, being posted, but what you did is you sort of looked at what was going on. You would capture things that caught your eye and sort of try to pool them together into groups and see if you notice patterns. For instance, there might be one street where there's a protest taking place. If there were 5 or 6 people all showing the same thing that don't seem to be following each other, don't seem to know each other, and are sharing the same thing, and you see similar things in the video, the same people in the video from different perspectives, and that they all look the same, then you have a good idea that that's really happening. And then you can get queues. Some people were actually holding newspapers in front of their, recording, with their phones, which actually showed the day that they were doing the reporting. They knew we were watching it, and they wanted us to report the authenticity of what it was that they were covering. So, I mean, we have that sort of assistance from people on the ground, which you won't always have. But I think the key to not getting overwhelmed is there's a process. The process is really you take a certain period of time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever is required to capture the essence of an event or something that's happening. And it could be a micro event in the broader event. Then you tabulate everything that you've captured, and you try to sort of explain that tabulation. So these 3 videos appear to be happening at the same time from 3 different sources. So then you add a layer of authenticity in the sense that you say, okay, so this is very probably happening right now. Or if you know for sure, if you've got enough information, you say, this is definitely confirmed and it's happening right now. And so that's kind of how, at a very high level, you do it. And then you just repeat that process. I think James can definitely add to this as well. Hand it over to
Yeah,
him.
so it's the urgency. So I'll give you a great example of the urgency we're talking about. This week of protests in Iran, people began to tweet out addresses or intersections where certain things were happening. So these are protesters on the ground, or these are people who claim to be protesters on the ground. And so they were tweeting out, there's tear gassing at such and such an intersection. There's a tank or police at such and such an intersection. We heard shooting in such and such a direction. And so, a bit overwhelmed myself with everything that was going on, I decided that I could just start to hone in on this one thing. Whenever anybody's tweeting streets or intersections, I can begin to look at that. And so I began to sort of see if I could make some sense of it, and time was, if this information is wrong and I tweet it out, what's the worst that could happen? Maybe, I don't know, but I do know if there's shooting at such and such an intersection and I don't tweet that, somebody could stumble into that and potentially die. So weighing the risks, I began to sort of tweet out just, not just the intersections, but also sort of my level of faith in the reporting. And soon I got a message from another who said, hey, I've been following you, and I put all of that stuff in a Google map. And this is literally, 2009. I had never seen a custom Google map before, okay? This is all brand new stuff. Remember, this is an era where most news agencies, even if they sites, do not have separate on teams pushing on paper, and they're just putting that stuff online. So I look at this map. I'm looking at a satellite image of Tehran marked with, shooting and police and roadblock and tear gas. And this is all science fiction stuff. So I tweet this stuff out, and I get a message about 10 minutes later from someone who says, I think you just saved my life. I was walking down such and such a street, and I saw your map, and I decided to turn a different way at this intersection. And right after that, I heard shooting. So I began to realize after that event that if we're going to report on something that's going on live, it's not just that we want to be first. That's important, that's great, but we want to begin to assess our understanding of whether or not we think that information is true. Now, let me fast forward a couple of years now and tell you how that methodology has paid off. So in Ukraine, the people in eastern Ukraine in 2014 in the spring and summer began to just see large groups of soldiers and weird armored vehicles and tanks just drive down their street. And like any of us, they had never seen this. I mean, Ukraine is a peaceful country. And so they filmed it and they posted that stuff. And some of it we were quite confident about. Some of it we were somewhat confident about. Some of it we were unsure of. If we could debunk it, we went one step further and said, no, this isn't real. But what we found was that if we just posted the information, all the information we had about some of these tanks or vehicles, that other people would chime in. So there are other people watching this conflict, and they would say, hey, I don't believe that. Or they would say, hey, this other vehicle was filmed on this other road like an hour ago, and they would send us that video, and now we've got, okay, it was here, and now it's here, which means it's going that way, and so now we've got a very conclusive body of evidence. Now, all of this, by the way, has been now referenced by people who have studied, the Russian intervention. I call it an invasion because that's what it was. We were able to identify those particular vehicles, and some of them are only made by the Russian military. Were never exported. So where did they come from? We were able to predict major battles based on tracking this information, but not all of it was verified. And some of it, we only verified much later, or we posted a video, and maybe 6 months later we found out where that video was located. But we had already found that video, so we could now go back and look at our original analysis, which we published. And the great thing about live blogging is you're not just making an article and moving on. Right, you're making a series of updates, so that information can get updated as you go. So those are the advantages of a live blog. What I find is that, and look, there's a lot of really fantastic live bloggers. The Guardian, for years did some really incredible live blogging on Syria and the Arab Spring in general, but particularly in Syria. But I find that each entry in our live blog, thanks to Pressimus, has its own URL. And what we found is that is incredibly helpful because we wind up all the time linking back to all of those other, here's a collection of videos, here's a translation we did. Each update in and of itself might be kind of boring. But then, you write an article that's sort of analysis, and every other word is a link to the data that backs up your analysis. That's much more powerful. So that's the kind of stuff that live blogging, when it's done right, each entry can have value. It's not just like, here's a tweet.
Yeah. James, as you were talking about the verification process, it kind of transitions into our next question from the community. They asked, the concept of verification of social media is an important one, especially for journalists when they're reporting. Will this being verified social media content be incorporated on the platform? Is that something you guys worry about when it comes to verification of social media when the content is live blogging? James or Sam, whoever, I guess both of you, if you like to tackle this one.
Sure. So right now, the platform, what it does is it essentially lets you connect all of your social media accounts to it, and then you can do all kinds of queries and searches on live or real-time content, and use it as kind of a dashboard to source the content, and then even just kind of we make it really easy for you to include these bits of content or information in your own story and publish it out. Now, in terms of that verification, we're currently more like a utility in that sense. We have not added anything to showcase that, oh, this has been verified or not. That's completely in the hands of the live blogger or the reporter or the journalist. However, it's definitely in the pipeline to do just that, right? Once the community is big enough, then we can start looking at, and we want to partner with other organizations that are potentially doing this. I know that there are some that are doing verifications of tweets and whatnot, and adding that layer of verification. Now, I should say though, again, coming back to the process, right? That when something is happening in real time and you're live reporting on it, most of the time you will probably be the first person who's adding, or among the first people who's adding that verification to that thing, right? So if it's a real-time thing, chances are no one's verified it. It takes time to do that. And as you're live blogging it, you can still use that. You can state your level of trust in whether this is a valid report or piece of information or not, and then you can refer back to it and update it in future updates as you kind of move forward. That's kind of how we've been doing it, and it's very effective, right? You don't really have the luxury to spend that hour verifying it to the nth degree because it's happening right then and there. But having said that, you know, there's, in terms of time, there is kind of a different sort of way that you can use this material depending on the urgency, right? So obviously, if you're doing a more of like a summary of what happened and adding, you know, the geopolitical context and all sorts of additional information to it, you have the time, you have the luxury, and then you can go back and verify it. So we haven't built anything into the platform that says, okay, this is, you know, probably true or definitely true or anything like that. But you know, moving forward in the future, we do intend to do that. It's really more feeding off of the live streams and really quickly being able to publish it and syndicate it. So what you publish, you can actually take a single line of code, pop that into any website or any web property, and it'll automatically load up in the same way that, say, like a YouTube video that you've embedded or like a tweet that you've embedded will show up in your site, except you're embedding an entire press stream, aka live blog, into your page. So as you're doing updates, those updates are showing up in your own relative property with links back, URL links back to your web property. So anyway, I had to sort of divert there.
So, you know, to go back to the first bit, you know, so one of the great things about Pressimus is you have the editor that you're writing in, and then right next to it you have your social media live search feeds that you can do live searches in. But one of the things that I do is I actually have curated Twitter lists that I've made myself through Twitter, and or just like, you know, my timeline, people who I've followed. And so as I'm writing, literally in the same screen as what I'm writing is the stream of news from the people who I trust. So, you know, one of the things that I think all journalists should be more aware of is your spider sense. You know, Malcolm Gladwell says that if you're an expert, your gut is almost always right. And I actually think journalists get this wrong a lot because you know, I think the most important thing that signals to me about how, you know, am I going to spend 10 minutes digging on this, or am I going to spend 45 minutes digging on this, or am I going to spend 4 weeks digging on this, is whether or not it matches the greater body of information that's out there. So, you know, I mean, a lot of times, you know, we might have, and this again is sort of the power of Pressimus, but also the power of the journalistic techniques that we built. You know, I might know a journalist who's in the field in the city that we're talking about, and I have a couple of YouTube channels that I know are legitimately in that city, and maybe I have a couple of Twitter accounts that I know are legitimately in that city, and then I got this whole body of stuff I don't know, right? I just don't know. There's a million people in this city, they're posting stuff, who knows? But what I do as I'm writing here, I've got the people I trust right here, and I can now synthesize, you know, by I'm posting writing here. I click one button and I've inserted a tweet from someone who I trust. I can write analysis below that. I click one more button and that's going to pull in a tweet from somebody I don't really know, and I can sort of clarify all of that as we go. Now, the other great thing is, as Sam said, when this is embedded on you know, interpretermag.com, our readers will see when we've updated. So they will get an indication that says, you know, load more. They know that this is not the end of the story. So they can then click that. So I don't have to worry about, geez, I mean, I do, but not as much. I don't have to worry as much about, I put this piece of information out there, you know, is it going to stand the test of time? You know, I put this information out there responsibly. I put, you know, as much effort into it as I could, and hopefully another piece of that puzzle will come along in the next update. And when it does, my readers will know right away.
Awesome. We've done a little bit of coverage on the process of Pressimus, but we've gotten a lot of questions from the community, and it'll gear us into the next question. So as a content creator and freelancer, being able to get the most value out of my content is very important. Doing real-time content is a skill that is important, but can Pressimus turn the real-time content into a longer-term reusable asset? If so, how?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, James alluded to this a little bit earlier in that when he said, the update that you're doing right now could be like a smaller, boring update on a tiny sort of thing, right? But over time, as you keep reporting on a day-to-day basis, and we would recommend, if you're going to live blog something, there's several ways to do it. I mean, you can do a quick one and then go off to the next story, which seems to be sort of the endemic issue in journalism today, is we're not doing very deep coverage of things. But one of the things that live blogging affords you is to be able to do deep coverage of something. So over time, these assets that you're building, these live reports that you're doing, become an archive that you can then search and reference and spot broader patterns in. Okay, so I think in that sense, it's very valuable. And then in a sort of separate sense, you can use Pressimus in the same way that you might want to use like a Medium or even just a WordPress blog, but with a little bit of extra. I like to kind of say it's kind of like a content management system on steroids, right? So you can write a piece, and you can keep working on it and then publish it out of draft, and it doesn't have to be a live piece. And the beauty of that is you now have this asset that you can syndicate in your own blog or blogs or websites, and it's literally at the click of a button, right? You can actually register your domains into Pressimus, and then when you publish, you can pick which sites you want that piece to go to and just hit press, and it'll get published to those, sort of automatically to those properties. So
I think
in
what
both
was like
those senses.
a question, or like probably a concern for those that haven't used the platform, is I think the concept of you're owning your content in a sense.
Right.
You're kind of taking back control of whatever it is that you're writing about, and you can send that snipped link to whichever platform or outlet and let them know that, okay, they can use this. But at the end of the day, when you want to go back to it, you still have your stream.
Correct.
So I think,
yeah.
So James, I know that you have experience doing this, right?
Yeah, I mean, so, it's sort of interesting to me because we spend, the interpreter is nerdy. I mean, we're covering the Ukraine and the Ukraine crisis every day, right? So it's like this tank moved here and this tank moved there, and it might be boring on any given day, but what happens is then we are able to pull from that detailed stuff and put it somewhere else. I just wrote a piece. I was asked to write a piece for Foreign Policy magazine, and they said, look, we've been reading all this stuff that you've been writing about whether or not the Russians have pulled their air force out of Syria. Can you just put all of that together in this in an article for us? And I thought about it and I said, geez, it's kind of boring. I've already written all this stuff. And now they want this article. But what I found was that, the journalists were reading all my stuff every day. They were reading the Pressimus live blog every day. But when I actually just took all that stuff and put it in a very factually oriented way, I didn't have to get into the details and the analysis that's fascinating to maybe the people who are listening to us talk, but might be boring to a reader. I already did that on Pressimus, right? I've already done the dirty work. It's my notebook, but it's a notebook we're publishing. Well, Foreign Policy made that their cover story for the day, and it got a ton of shares. It was one of their better shared articles of the entire issue. So, it works, and and I think that ability to just it's a peer reviewed notebook. That's what it really is, because you're publishing this stuff, you're able to update it, people are looking at it. Yes, they sometimes quote it. We just had this week the USA Today quoted a translation we did. And they link back to our article. Well, that was done in Pressimus, and it was done in in just a little thing. So that's all there. And and Sam and I are also talking about, we all come from a freelance background. So, we're sort of thinking as we move on, and we can't talk about some of our plans, but we've got them to make that process even more streamlined, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we've got some things in the works that will definitely be of interest to the people that are part of the community on Pressimus right now, and that we're hoping to grow the community with. We really want it to be like that and have more journalists coming in and helping us to kind of grow the process and sort of magnify the value to everybody that's involved in it. One thing that I'd like to sort of mention is that back, I think, James, you covered the MH17 catastrophe, or the plane that crashed in the Ukraine, and you did it on Pressimus. You basically syndicated to Interpreter, and then the Daily Beast wanted it, and you actually then were able to syndicate directly to the Daily Beast in real time too. So
the Daily Beast, and they paid for that. They syndicated our entire live blog that day, and because we were using Pressimus, the minute it appeared on the Interpreter, it appeared on the Daily Beast right away. So so they didn't have to micromanage that process either. And I should say, we're a little bit I use Pressimus not just for live blogging. So it really formats when you want to embed social media or videos. One of my favorite aspects to it is this little thing, but you know how in Facebook or in I think Google Plus does the same thing. When you put in a link, it stylizes that link. It creates a nice little box, and it shows you the publication name and the title of the article and some teaser text and the picture. Well, actually, Pressimus does that. So, you can, rather than just make a hyperlink, which of course you can still do, you can stylize this stuff. So we actually write some longer articles there too, because you don't have to fool with the code, and we could run updates on those longer articles if we wanted to very easily. And of course you can edit the actual press without making a new update. But yeah, no, I just so we use it for longer articles too. We don't just use it for live blogs.
There's one other thing I wanted to quickly add in answer to that question, and about the value and of your sort of material that you're publishing in a platform like Pressimus. I mean, we've all heard of or know about the fact that Facebook and various other platforms are encouraging publications and online magazines to publish directly on their properties or on their like articles or whatnot platform, and that's it affords benefits to companies to not have to sort of manage their own assets, to be right in the distribution channel where everybody's reading. There's definitely benefits there. But what we wanted to try to do is also in the spirit of keeping media diverse, right? To give you sort of the best of both worlds, a place where it's central, where you're publishing this stuff, and other people can, it's kind of an exchange, right, of content, and other people can interact with you and converse with you sort of socially through the content. You can @mention people in your stories just as you would @mention someone on Facebook or Twitter, but in these rich stories, and they get notified. But we also wanted to make, so you have the central store, the central place where your content is, but it's your content, and you can push it out to your own properties, so you don't get that sort of vanilla, everything looks the same, everybody's on the same platform thing that I think some people are concerned about. I just wanted to kind of stress that point as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great point, Sam, because if you look at the interpreter, the large majority of the content that's on the interpreter is written on Pressimus, but you're going to interpretermag.com, right? So, we're funded by Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, so we're not running ads right now, but we could run ads, and that's all. It's all, people don't go to pressimus.com/interpretermag. Now they could. I have my own, Pressimus.com/James Miller, which again, I don't have to worry about WordPress updates or all that stuff. I can just publish to it. But yeah, and then I could syndicate that stuff wherever I wanted.
Exactly.
Awesome. So our next question is from our next community member. So my impression is that this is something that can be used in a newsroom setting and to the freelance journalist covering a beat. So what are some advantages and disadvantages for both scenarios and when using the platform? And what do you suggest to do in these different scenarios when using Pressimus?
It's a great question. James, you're using it with a team right now, so maybe you can address the sort of the newsroom aspect.
Yeah, so here's something that's great. You can't actually just live blog with a team on WordPress or on Squarespace, and I'll tell you why. Because in order to do that, and we used to just live blog in WordPress before Pressimus was built. We were live blogging. But you could only live blog one person at a time, because if you have multiple people working in the same article and updating, they will overwrite each other's updates. This is true to this day. WordPress now, the latest iteration, if you log in and somebody from your team logs into the same article, it kicks you out, which is good. But with Pressimus, it doesn't matter, because what I'm writing and what you're writing could be in the same press stream, so it could appear in the same place, but they're actually separate entries. So my whole team could be writing different aspects or analyzing different videos, and it's all going to appear in the same spot, and it's going to appear right away. Now, we're actually building some things that will insert editorial control over that too, so that's coming down the line. So we could have even more users on, and maybe some of them are senior editors and some of them are interns, and their content all might be good, but it all needs editing, right? So we're building that into the process too. So that's up next. But what's great now is that we can just all continuously work on whatever we're doing independently. We also use Pressimus for note-taking, in the sense that we have presses that they're not public, but they're not public. So we're sort of filing this information away, and we can all access that in real time. So those are some of the things that are great for newsrooms. For freelancers, I think the main benefit is, besides the actual functionality of the editor, which again I think just helps me in my daily work. It helps me generate the content. But the big advantage is, when you're done, you can take that HTML and embed it wherever you want. So you want to embed it on your website, you want to embed it on somebody else's website, that's fine, and it's ready to go. And it will stylize, by the way, based on whichever website you publish. So, the fonts, all that stuff is just going to automatically do it.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't even have to do that if you're not in the business of running a digital property, right, or a website that requires maintenance. You can just use the permanent URLs that are made available to you in the platform, and they actually function and look good. You can sort of sort a stream based on newest first or oldest first. You can zoom right into an individual press. What we call like one post in a stream, we call that a press. You can just go right into that and grab its URL and just embed that. So it really affords somebody to really quickly get set up, not have to worry about code, get all these tools into their arsenal, and be able to start building a following and building a reputation over time, writing on whatever topic or topics that they're interested in. And we're going to, as James sort of alluded to, what's there now is pretty comprehensive and powerful, but there's a layer that's going to be added in relative short order that is really going to kick that up a notch and help the freelancers and even smaller organizations really monetize the content that they're producing. So that's, I mean, you can already do it. You can already manually sell the content to someone who wants to syndicate that, but we're really going to kick that up a notch in the coming
So
future.
that may go into my next question, and the final question that I have from the community was, what's in the pipeline for Pressimus? If you can give us a little bit more of a tease. I know you've alluded to a lot of things, but what can we see? Because, you know, Sam, when I first met you, since then, the platform has evolved so much.
Right.
So I can only anticipate within the next even 3 to 6 months, it's going to be something even better than it is now. So can you give us a little tease of what we can expect?
Sure. Yeah. I'll frame it in the context of the problems that I think, some of the problems that freelancers and journalists are currently facing. So right now, and it's been this way for years, right? So you're seeing, just the process of submitting a story and getting that approved and then finally published, right? If you've ever tried to do that, then you know that it can take days, sometimes weeks, and then that story becomes either obsolete or has to be completely rewritten by the time it goes to press, right? So we want to completely eliminate that friction and take it from weeks to days. So that's kind of one teaser. I won't sort of get into how that happens. Not even days, but hours and maybe minutes. Okay, and then at the end of the day, we want to make it possible for. I mean, look, you have companies downsizing right, left, and center. Print media, digital publications, are letting go of a lot of their journalists, and what we're seeing is sort of smaller teams having to do a lot more, which is what Pressimus kind of caters to. But also, if you've been caught in a situation, many a good journalist has been downsized. You had the New Republic last year; they let go of a lot of people. I think Mashable just let go of a bunch of people, and so you have all these talented people. They still want to, produce and can produce really valid and valuable content. So we want to empower those people to be able to freelance effectively and get paid for it quickly. So I hope that is enough of a teaser. I can't do much more than that.
We'll take what we can get, Sam. So thank you for that.
And well, I alluded to it earlier. The editorial sort of aspect of it is about to be launched. Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Sam, but it's coming relatively soon. But so what that will allow us to do is, again, editors will have the ability to publish automatically, but they'll also have the ability to sort of submit that to to a member of the team and say, hey, can you look at this? And obviously lower down the line, so by the way, this is going to be hugely helpful when there's really quick breaking news, because now you can you're not just pulling information in from external sources, you're pulling information in from internal sources. I think we're about to do more with news feeds so your sort of news searches again within the editor that you're running, and you can pull that content right into the platform. So there's definitely a lot of really good stuff. We've made it. We've put in a lot of tutorials now. Sam has done this incredible work with this walkthrough because it's a different looking editor than a WordPress, and the differences are what makes it cool. But if it's different, it's not the same. So you got to learn this stuff. So all that stuff is, the usability of the website is improving sort of all the time.
Well, James, Sam, thank you for your time. I really appreciate the fact that you were able to do this conversation with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And thanks, Nick, for facilitating the talk. Like always, you do an amazing job.
Happy to help. And I also just wanted to, again, remind people that, if you're interested in some of the issues that we've been talking about today around verification, like we have some really basic tools and lessons and training material on our site at g.co/newslab on how to really get started in the very basic ways using verification techniques using Google's tools like Google Search, Google Street View, Google Earth, and so on. So definitely check that out, g.co/newslab. There's also additional information about our First Draft Coalition and a few other partnerships that we have with journalists and innovators like James and Sam in this field on our site. And if anybody ever has any questions, you can always reach out to us at newslabsupport@google.com. We do trainings and outreach of many different types, including events just like this one. So we hope to see you all again soon.
Awesome. So at this time, I'd like to announce the topic we have for our next conversation. That's going to take place Thursday, June 2nd. We'd love for you all to join us, and we'll have the honor of having award-winning journalist, filmmaker, and author of Blood Diamonds, Greg Campbell. Greg will join us to talk about one of his latest projects. It's the documentary of American war photographer Chris Hondros. He's known best for his conflict photography. Hondros covered every major world event until his death in April of 2011, where he was killed in combat in Libya. So Greg is not only the director of the documentary, but a childhood friend of Hondros. He will take the viewers on a global journey in the film to meet those in Chris's most influential photos and to uncover their little-known backstories. So we're super excited for our June talk, and we hope you guys will tune in. It's definitely not something you want to miss. And if you want more details, stay tuned on the SPJ International Community Facebook page, Twitter feed, and website to get more details as the time comes into June 2nd. So again, thank you, Sam, and thank you, James, for joining us today. I'm so glad that we were able to make this happen and let people know about Pressimus. And I kind of see this as an opportunity to take control back into your own hands when it comes to your content. So thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I should just really quickly add, it is a closed invite right now, so if you do want to try it, by all means pop by. There is a passphrase to use. If you go to pressimus.com and register, it's My Voice Matters, all one word. So we would love to welcome anybody on this call to try it out and get in touch.
Awesome, and we'll include that information on the link afterwards when we share the YouTube link. So
great.
Thank you guys for everything, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, and see you June 2nd.
Take care.
Bye-bye.